Okay, we're back with what is going to be one of our last video learnings, as we're now approaching race day, or the big day, the final day of camp. So now it's super appropriate to talk about tapering and striving for what we would call an effective taper, right? A race can be won or lost. I think that's fair to say, right? Depending on your taper. I mean, you can for sure get a taper completely wrong and not get your best performance out on the day. If you get a taper right and do it well, you absolutely can, get your best performance out on the day and, win in terms of your targets, right? Let's talk about the purpose of tapering. Why should people taper and value tapering in general?
Yeah, I mean, like we've been training for a long time. The body is loading. It's loaded. You're tired. Now it's about benefiting from all the work you've done. It's about starting to rest. It's about starting to get fresh, and actually, the feeling of being offloaded makes you be able to run faster, swim faster, bike faster, and suddenly you're starting to see all the fruit after all the hard work that you've been doing. That's basically what we're doing. We're talking about getting it right or getting it wrong. Like you can get it wrong by training too much into the race, but you can also get it wrong by training too little into the race. So it's such a fine balance between volume and intensity into this race day to get it right, because if we train too little, we get too sluggish. If we train too much, we get too tired. So it's that balance that we're striving for.
And what about if you don't taper at all? Like, what if people actually have not placed value on tapering in the past and their training has not been structured in a way that includes a taper? What is the risk there?
I mean, you probably will not get the best out of you. You will probably have lingering fatigue, depending on, of course, how much you train. And also saying, again, like a taper, if you don't train a solid amount, a taper is probably not necessary. So if it is that you have been loading the body and you've been feeling the fatigue and the tiredness, a taper will be effective and necessary and will bring out a better outcome than if you didn't do it. So you have to take that into account as well.
And then what about, you just mentioned it now, you haven't done enough training, or you haven't done a lot of training, therefore the need for tapering is less. Is there a specific measure for that, or what, in your outlook on that, what would be the trigger to say, okay, this person definitely needs a taper?
So put it the other way around, this person it needs a taper. Like if you have sessions every day in a week, and every day you do a session, you're ready, you're fresh, and you're firing, you probably don't need a taper. Then the load of your training is really might not make you better. Like that kind of overload of training where you're kind of building layer upon layer upon layer, and suddenly you're starting to feel tired and a little bit heavy, and it's a little bit tough to train sometimes. Then the body is, you're accumulating that sort of stress, the training, and that sort of feeling in the body. If you are doing the taper, then that is when you would benefit from that training that you put in.
So to break that down then, if you're somebody that's frequently training but you're not accumulating fatigue, and you're not building, let's say, session upon session, the intensity, and you're not going into these dark places, you may not need to taper.
Exactly.
But those that are accumulating fatigue day on day, week on week,
that's right,
then you need
the taper. Like, have you been following this program, you will definitely benefit from doing the taper. Absolutely. And you will also be feeling, then the feeling of the taper is like you obviously super excited to race, but you might be feeling, you might expecting that you're feeling fresh, and you're not. You're actually feeling sluggish, you're feeling tired, and you're starting to doubt whether this is right and whether you're actually ready come race day. And I think that putting too much thoughts into what you're doing in the taper period might not be a smart choice.
So even from your perspective, having been at the peak of sport, at an elite level in triathlon, you are saying that you didn't feel great in taper week sometimes? Like, I want to give people a sense of how did you feel in taper week?
It really varied. It varied a lot. Sometimes I would be feeling flying and was so excited and was feeling that I wanted to beat PBs every single day in that week, and I had to be held in a short leash to kind of not go too hard. But there was also be other weeks where I would taper weeks where I would be feeling really heavy. The heart rate would not come up, and I could not find the numbers, or I couldn't run fast enough, and that kind of got to my head. I was afraid of that. I've got it all wrong. I've trained too much. I don't have enough time to get out of this fatigue feeling I have in my body. And I realized actually that if I did this taper week like I should, I would be ready come race day. The more I thought about how terrible I felt, the worse I felt actually. So when I started to learn to just let it go
and trust the
process and trust that this taper has worked so many times for me before, because I like to replicate the taper. When I just let that go, that overthinking and that doubt whether I could perform or not, it just kind of just fell into place.
And then what is an effective taper then? I mean, this video is about, trying to make people aware of what an effective taper is, so striving for an effective taper. What should be people's goal when it comes to the taper going into a race? What are they actually striving for?
So we want to bring down the volume and we want to bring down the intensity, but we still want to keep volume and intensity. So we don't want to bring you down too much, and you should definitely not be afraid of going hard. Because if you don't go hard, you're not accessing that high intensity which is required for the body. So you still have to keep the body familiar with the effort and the feeling of going hard. But what we do then is that we will have some efforts, but then we will have a lot of recovery in between the efforts, so that the body kind of recover in between all efforts, so they're not carrying any fatigue onto the next day. So that's kind of what we want to do, and then we are just slowly bringing down volume throughout the week. I like to kind of have it a little bit up and down in the rest week or taper week, where like Monday is an easy day, Tuesday, Wednesday we do a bit of work, Thursday or Friday is an easier day, and then the day before we again find a little bit of effort at some fire. So like to keep the body on and sharp come race day.
And I would also say that typically if you're traveling to a race, your travel often comes inside the week leading into the race. At least that's very generalized, but that's very common. In that regard, you really have to be thinking about how your travel day complements your taper days. So as an example, if you're racing on a Sunday and you travel into the race on a Wednesday or a Thursday, the travel day should be typically a full day of rest in that taper week. And then your peak or your high intensity periods come before the travel, not immediately the hours before the travel, but before. And when you get on the ground, assuming you've been flying or driving a long way, it's about getting your body in sync, right?
Moving again.
But it's really, it's personal, of course, but travel plays a big role in taper weeks as well, right?
Yeah, it does, and you need to respect that it actually can be quite stressful to travel. Maybe you don't feel stressed, but it actually is a little hard to travel. So don't think that you need to cram extra training in on that race day. On that travel day, I would more say, like, when it is that you get to the site or to your hotel, go for a walk or go for a spin or go for a swim or something very light to just keep the body moving again, but don't go out and think, oh, I should have just done those fast intervals on a run session. Don't just do that immediately when you get to the race site. So take that travel day as like a day where you kind of come down and you actually rest. And then when you then get there to the site the day after, you pick it up and you train a little bit again, so that you are getting in tune with everything that you need to do on the race.
Yeah, and I would also say that taper weeks could be translated as, you know, stress reduction weeks. It's easier said than done, for sure, especially if you are traveling into a race or there's a lot of logistics around a race. I often felt that race week for us was one of the most stressful weeks to manage. I mean, managing the stress and reducing the stress in race week, mainly because you had a lot of commitments, or, you know, there was a lot of logistics that we had to be thinking about, whether that's press meetings or whether that's appearances or whether that was, you know, driving to view the course. You know, I remember so many times we placed a high value on recceing the course and you riding as much of it as you could realistically. Yeah. But that took a lot of time. Yeah. You know, I mean, some cases I clearly remember 70.3 Worlds in 14, and trying to recce that bike course was almost half a day out. Yeah. You know, and then if we didn't build in those logistics, it would be very stressful then if you were like, okay, but I still need to get my training in. I still need to get my 3 sessions in.
Exactly. There were many times actually where we, just to talk a little bit about it, we often brought a trainer, so that sometimes it was just not possible to go out and race or to ride the course, and then simply just do a trainer ride and then go in the car and check the course, because sometimes it was just too much time if I was supposed to ride on the course too. And there were times where it was just not possible to get on the course, that I would just be studying Google Maps like crazy, going down to Street View to see what I should expect. Because for me, a stress reducer was to really know the course and what to expect out there. So it never ever came as a surprise if it was very technical, if it was very hilly, or what could happen, because it could have a big impact on the race.
And that plays just a general big part of an effective taper, is saying, okay, you know, if we assume that your taper week is a week long, effectively tapering also takes into consideration all of the other stress factors that you have, you know, whether that be travel, whether that be work actually that you have still in taper week. And it's like making sure that you're still getting enough training in and enough stimulation on the system, but at the same time reducing the stress, so that when you're on that start line, you're completely free of any excess shit in the thoughts, and you can just go full gas and open up the burners.
And that's also, you know, in the taper week, you are not training as much, so you have more time, but don't just do a lot of other things then. Just really use that time to relax and recover, because that's what it's for, really, and not do all the practical things that you didn't have time to do the other weeks.
To close this, any specifics, like any memorable taper weeks that you had, or any memorable learnings that you had with regards to your tapering? Is anything?
Yeah, like I have one taper where I was not getting ready. I was just so tired, so sore in my body, and it just didn't wanna come around. And I was just almost counting hours in the end for like, when am I going to actually feel fresh? And it was literally come race morning that suddenly it's like, okay, it's now or never. We'll see what I got in there. I have nothing to lose. And then, I came around and had a great race. But that week I was nervous because I was just not coming around. And I was obviously analyzing, what have I done wrong? Why am I feeling so terrible? Because usually I start to come around maybe like Wednesday, Thursday, usually. But I just did not come around that time there. And then another thing is that I learned over the years to, don't overthink it in race week, and don't analyze too much how you feel in your body, because the body knows what's gonna happen. If you replicate the taper week, they know, the body know, okay, something is up. We are going to race again. I have tried this before. I know what to do. And that always also gives some sort of calmness, that you're just replicating a recipe that worked before.
I think that familiarity in general is so good for calming the nerves and making you feel like, okay, this is uncharted territory, yes, but these feelings and these emotions and these senses that I have, I'm familiar with what they are and I know how to deal with them. And that's why replication of
Exactly, that's also why I
tapering.
think that it's so important that the taper is just a recipe that you know, because the race you don't know. Often that's completely new and it's stressful enough as it is. So then, do what you're used to doing leading into, so at least you can control all that.
The last closing point that I will say, and this is from my seat, having been the supportive partner to Helle, is that be aware that you will naturally just spike in your anxiety, your twitchiness in race week. And I, at least my observations of Helle in race week was that she just became a little bit more alert. She became a little bit more conscious of, some of the things that we were doing and around. So feel free to pass this video on to your partner to say that if you are a little bit more stressful or reactive in race week, I've dealt with it and it's perfectly normal and common, and you shouldn't stress about it.
And I would also say, like, it's also very normal that you suddenly feel a little nickel somewhere in your body, and you're just, again, over-analyzing and checking your body. Is like, oh, I feel something that hurts there, and it's like, that will disappear on race day. You won't even think about it. So that is also quite common, but that's again your anxiety and and you also excited about everything, but you want everything to be perfect in your body, right?
Yeah, and as soon as the gun goes, everything goes out the window.
Yes.
I mean, then it's, everything is done, everything's behind you, and it's about executing. So
and it's about trusting what you've done and all the work that you put in. You can't do more than that.
No. Very good. That wraps it up, and that I think is taper and striving for an effective taper.